The school auditorium was overflowing with noise, movement, and excitement as students rushed around in their bright uniforms. Parents squeezed into tightly packed rows of old wooden chairs, and teachers hurried from one corner to another trying to keep order. And in the middle of all this chaos sat a quiet teenage girl with her black stepfather beside her. The only man in the entire hall who seemed completely still, calm, and silent despite the noise swirling around them like a restless river. He sat with perfect posture, hands folded, eyes soft, dressed in his simple clean shirt and old jacket that he always wore with quiet dignity. While the girl kept glancing at him every few seconds, her heart tightening because every time someone walked past them, she could hear whispers that stabbed her chest like invisible knives. Two mothers in fancy dresses whispered behind their hands, glancing at him and shaking their heads. A group of students giggled loudly, pointing at his worn shoes. Some boys passing by made exaggerated bowing gestures, mocking his politeness, muttering, "Look at him, acting so proper." One even laughed and whispered, "Her stepdad looks like he walked out of a charity poster." Another added, "Black people like him don't belong here with rich parents." The words hit her like a slap, but before she could speak, her stepfather gently placed his hand on her arm, giving her that soft smile he always used when he wanted to calm her. The kind of smile that held kindness but also something else. Something tired, something that looked like it had been carved into his face after years of being strong in a world that wasn't kind to him. She hated that smile because she knew it was his shield, his way of hiding pain she could feel even if he never said it out loud. "It's okay," he whispered softly, voice calm and steady, and even though she wanted to scream that it wasn't okay, that none of this was okay, she swallowed her anger because he squeezed her hand gently, silently asking her to stay quiet. But inside her heart, something heavy twisted, because she didn't understand how he could stay so calm when people treated him so cruelly, how he could lower his head with humility when they mocked his skin color, how he could keep smiling even when kids half his age disrespected him for no reason except ignorance. One boy walked by and snickered loudly. Who invited the nobody? His friends burst into laughter. Her stepfather lowered his eyes, almost shrinking into himself, while her hands curled into fists. "Say something," she whispered in frustration, almost begging him. But he simply shook his head, whispering the same sentence he always said when someone mocked him, "Let it go." She wanted to shout, "Why? Why should we let it go? Why don't you ever defend yourself? Why do you always swallow your words?" But his eyes weren't angry. They were sad and tired. It was a sadness she had noticed many times whenever he looked into the mirror, whenever he sat alone on the porch, whenever someone insulted him and he simply bowed his head. It was a sadness that came from somewhere deep inside him, from a past he never talked about. She realized then that the silence he carried around was not weakness, it was pain. A pain she didn't understand yet. The ceremony began, the lights dimming as the principal stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone, his voice booming through the hall. "Welcome, everyone, to our annual Courage and Excellence Awards night," he announced proudly. The crowd clapped loudly, parents smiling, students cheering. But the girl could feel the tension in her stepfather's body beside her, the subtle way his shoulders stiffened, the way his eyes narrowed slightly as if he sensed something coming. She leaned closer and whispered, "Are you okay?" He forced a small smile. "Of course." But she knew that smile. It wasn't real. The principal continued, "Tonight, we have a very special mystery guest. A hero. A man who risked everything to save lives in a recent dangerous incident. He has chosen to stay hidden until today." The audience started murmuring with excitement, whispers spreading like wildfire. A hero? Who? Is he famous? Maybe a firefighter. Maybe a soldier. Maybe someone from the government. The students sitting around her began speculating loudly, some rolling their eyes, some acting dramatic. But the girl didn't join their guessing, not because she wasn't interested, but because something strange began happening right beside her. Her stepfather's hands started to shake. Not a lot, just a small tremble at first, almost invisible, but she saw it. She always saw the little things. She watched the way he clasped his fingers together tightly, like he was trying to stop the shaking. She noticed the way his breathing grew slightly sharper, how his eyes lowered as if he didn't want anyone to notice him. She leaned in again, whispering, "What's wrong?" He shook his head, lifting a hand to wipe an invisible sweat from his brow. "Nothing. I'm fine." But she didn't believe him. She knew something was wrong because she had seen him calm in every situation, but never like this. Never scared. Never anxious. Never trembling. He wasn't just uncomfortable. He was afraid. Terrified. And that terrified her. The principal continued speaking on the stage, describing the hero with dramatic pauses. He was at the right place at the right time, he said, and he risked his own life to save a family stuck inside a burning bus. The fire was spreading fast, the windows shattered, smoke filling everything. But this man, this brave man, didn't run away. He broke the glass with his bare hands, pulled out the children first, shielded them from fire, then dragged the parents out too. Gasps echoed across the hall. Her eyes widened. She slowly turned to look at her stepfather again. His shoulders were trembling now, not from fear of the crowd, but from something deeper, something that made his breath shake as if he was reliving the moment. Anyone would have died, the principal continued. But this man stayed until the very last second, until the flames were about to swallow the bus. Then he collapsed from smoke inhalation. Thankfully, he survived. The girl felt her heartbeat speed up, hammering in her chest. Her stepfather closed his eyes for a second, swallowing hard, his jaw tightening. The principal's next sentence cut through the air like a knife. And tonight, for the first time, we will reveal the name of this hidden hero. The crowd roared with applause, excitement rippling through the room. But the girl was frozen. She saw the truth before the words were spoken. She whispered in shock, "It was you, wasn't it?" Her stepfather didn't answer. He couldn't. His trembling hands, his lowered eyes, the sadness in his silence, they were the answer. He didn't want the spotlight. He didn't want recognition. He didn't want people to know what he had done. And suddenly, everything made sense. Why he never reacted to insults. Why he always stayed quiet. Why he looked heartbroken every time someone mocked him. He wasn't hiding because he was weak. He was hiding because he had seen more pain and danger than any person should. He was hiding because his past carried weight the world couldn't see. And now, for the first time, she realized her stepfather wasn't just a gentle man. He was a man carrying a heavy truth. A truth everyone would soon see. A truth that would silence every person who ever mocked him. She grabbed his hand tightly, whispering urgently, "What are you afraid of?" He looked at her with eyes full of emotion, whispering in a trembling voice she had never heard before, "Because once they know, everything changes." And in that moment, as the principal lifted a sealed envelope on stage, as the crowd leaned forward in anticipation, as the lights dimmed for dramatic effect, the girl felt something powerful wash over her. Her stepfather wasn't just part of the audience tonight. He was the story. He was the mystery. He was the hidden hero. The man everyone had laughed at. The man everyone had ignored. The man they called nobody. And now, he was about to be called on stage. And nothing would ever be the same again. She sat beside him in the crowded auditorium, her heart squeezing with every whisper, every laugh, every cruel glance that landed on her stepfather, and she hated how people judged him before knowing anything about him. He sat still, shoulders slightly hunched, nodding politely whenever someone looked at him, and even though the hurt was clear in his soft eyes, he pretended not to hear the comments dripping with racism and cruelty. She watched him carefully, trying to understand the quiet sadness that always lived behind his warm smile. He had raised her since she was a child, treated her like his own blood, protected her from every pain. Yet he never talked about himself, never shared stories from his past, never kept photographs, never mentioned old friends or family. It was as if his life began the day he married her mother. She always thought he was simply private, but now, seeing the way he absorbed every insult without reacting, something inside her whispered that he wasn't just quiet, he was hiding something. When the group of boys walked past again, one of them making a cruel joke about his skin and calling him a background extra, she saw her stepfather's fingers tighten around the edge of his seat. Just for a moment. Just enough to show he wasn't as unaffected as he pretended. She leaned closer and whispered, "Why don't you say something? They are hurting you." But he just smiled gently, that same painful smile she had seen so many times, and whispered, "Silence is stronger sometimes." She didn't understand. She wanted him to stand up, to speak, to defend himself, but he only gave her hand a light, reassuring squeeze, the kind fathers give when they want to calm their children without causing a scene. Still, she could feel it. Something inside him trembled. Something old. Something heavy. The ceremony began, and the loud chatter died down as lights dimmed, the stage glowing under bright spots. Parents leaned forward, students sat straighter, teachers smiled with pride, and the principal stepped forward with a microphone. The girl tried to pay attention, but she kept glancing at her stepfather. His gaze was unfocused, distant, like he wasn't even in the room. His hands rested on his knees, but his fingers twitched slightly whenever someone whispered behind him. She wondered what memories lived behind those calm eyes. Had he always dealt with this silence? Had the world always looked at him with the same judgment? Had he always been mocked, dismissed, pushed aside? Her heart hurt thinking about it. The principal spoke with excitement, announcing different awards: Best Student, Best Athlete, Best Volunteer, and the crowd clapped politely. But the moment the principal mentioned the special honor of the night, the entire room shifted. Everyone leaned forward. Even the whispering stopped. She felt her stepfather stiffen slightly beside her. The principal explained that the honor was being given to someone who had saved many lives during a dangerous incident weeks ago, someone the town called the hidden hero. Nobody knew who he was because the hero refused to reveal his identity. Rumors spread everywhere. Some said it was a firefighter. Others said it was a veteran. Some parents believed it was a police officer. But none of them were right. And the girl could feel it. Deep in her bones. She didn't know why, but something inside her whispered that the man sitting beside her, the man who carried kindness like a shield and silence like a burden, knew more than he let on. He stared at the floor, his breathing growing uneven. She tried to ask if he was okay, but before she could speak, a woman sitting behind them giggled and whispered loudly, "What if it's the beggar-looking man in front? Wouldn't that be funny?" Her stepfather's shoulders tensed. One of the boys snorted. Another added, "A hero? That guy? Nah, he looks like he can't even save himself." The girl felt her blood boil. She clenched her fists so tightly her nails dug into her skin. She almost stood up to yell at them when she felt her stepfather's hand on her arm, holding her down gently. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor, but his voice was steady when he whispered, "Don't fight anger with anger." She shook her head, the frustration choking her. "But they're hurting you." His next words made her heart break. "I've had worse in my life." Worse? Her breath stopped. What worse? What pain did this gentle man hide behind his calm eyes? Why did his voice sound like it carried years of quiet suffering? Why did everyone else think they knew him just because of his skin? The principal continued talking about the hero, how he had run into danger when everyone else ran away, how he had saved not just one life but many, how he had disappeared before anyone could thank him. The more the principal spoke, the more unsettled her stepfather looked. His hands shook, just a little. His eyes blinked too slowly, as if he was fighting memories rising inside him. She leaned closer, whispering softly, "Are you okay?" He forced a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yes. It was a lie. She could feel it. His heart pounded so loudly she could almost hear it. Then something unexpected happened. A young boy from the back row stood up and shouted, "My dad said the hero is a very powerful man with a huge past." Someone laughed. Someone else whispered, "Not him for sure," pointing at her stepfather. She felt her heart break in a way it never had before. She was used to being bullied at school, used to being judged because she didn't have much money, used to being quiet. But seeing her stepfather take insult after insult, seeing him swallow pain after pain, something about it shattered her soul. She turned to him again. "Why don't you defend yourself?" she whispered shakily. He didn't answer for a long time. His eyes stayed forward, staring at the stage like he was looking beyond it. like he was remembering something painful from a life she didn't know existed. Finally, in a soft voice that trembled like a weak flame in the wind, he said, "I've learned that sometimes the world understands the truth when it's ready, not when we demand it." She didn't understand at all. But before she could speak, the principal's voice echoed again. Now, our hidden hero, the man who risked everything to save strangers, the man we owe our lives to, is about to be called on stage. The auditorium went silent. Completely silent. Every head turned toward the stage. Every eye widened in anticipation. Every breath held. But the girl didn't look at the stage. She looked at her stepfather. And saw something she had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of danger. Not fear of getting hurt. No. A deeper fear. The fear of being known. The fear of truth being revealed. The fear of facing a past that refused to stay buried. His hands clutched the sides of his chair. His eyes glistened with emotion he was trying desperately to hide. His entire body trembled. She whispered, "Why are you scared?" He closed his eyes slowly, and whispered something that made the air around her freeze. "Because I know exactly who they're calling." She walked beside her stepfather down the hallway, her heart aching with every echo of laughter bouncing off the walls, each cruel voice drilling into her chest, each whisper reminding her that people judged him not for who he was but for what he looked like. And even though she tried to stay calm, she felt anger boiling inside her like a fire she couldn't put out. Her stepfather walked slowly, shoulders slightly bent, head lowered not in shame but in a quiet acceptance that came from years of facing the same hatred. And as they reached the cafeteria doors, she saw a group of parents staring at him, their eyes cold and full of silent judgment, whispering things they didn't dare say loudly because they knew it was wrong but still enjoyed spewing their poison. He simply tightened his hand on the strap of his old bag and kept walking with the same calm, gentle grace he always had, but she noticed something different. His breathing wasn't steady like before. It was heavy, almost painful, as if every hurtful stare was stabbing him in places she couldn't see. She walked closer to him, brushing her arm against his, and he gave her a soft smile that only made her heart break more, because she knew he was trying to protect her from the very pain he carried. They found an empty table and sat down quietly, her stepfather taking small, slow breaths while she pretended to play with her phone. But her eyes kept scanning the room, watching the clusters of students pointing, laughing, nudging each other as they looked at him like he was some joke in a cheap comedy show. She wanted to scream at them, wanted to tell them he was the kindest man she had ever known, wanted to tell them how much he had sacrificed for her, how he never once raised his voice, how he worked extra hours so she never felt the pain he felt. But every time she opened her mouth, her stepfather touched her wrist lightly and whispered, "Let it go, people show what they carry in their hearts," and she would fall silent again, wondering how a man who suffered so much still had so much warmth left. But today, she could tell something was different. He kept glancing toward the stage where the principal and staff were setting up the lights and microphones for the hero reveal. He rubbed his thumb against his palm, a nervous habit she had never seen before, and when she asked if he was feeling okay, he simply smiled and said, "Just thinking about things." His voice sounded far away, like he was trapped somewhere in old memories, memories that didn't belong to this school cafeteria filled with cruel children and rude adults. She leaned her head on his shoulder, whispering, "You're not alone." And he closed his eyes for a moment, the smallest, saddest smile crossing his face. Before they could talk more, the same group of boys from before walked past their table, louder this time, bolder this time, because the cafeteria was full and cruelty always grew stronger when it had an audience. One boy snickered loudly, "Look at him, wearing the same shirt again," and another one added, "He walks like he's lost. Maybe he shouldn't be here," and someone else muttered, "Why does she bring him? He doesn't even look like her dad." Laughter exploded around them like fireworks. Her stepfather stared at the table, his hands clasped together, his knuckles white, but he didn't respond, not even a sigh. The girl's throat burned. She jumped up, ready to attack, ready to shout, ready to defend him with every breath she had. But before she could even get the words out, her stepfather gently took her wrist and pulled her back down. "No," he whispered softly. "Not like this." She looked at him in disbelief. "Why do you let them talk like that? Why do you stay quiet? They don't know you, they don't know what you've done. They don't know," He squeezed her hand gently. Some truths don't need to be spoken. They reveal themselves when the time is right. She blinked, confused. What truth? What time? What was he talking about? The boy who mocked him earlier began to imitate him, walking with slow, exaggerated steps, and the cafeteria filled with cruel laughter again. But her stepfather didn't even look up. Instead, he looked at the stage again, his eyes filling with something she couldn't understand. Pain, fear, hope, or maybe all three at once. She stared at him, her mind spinning with question after question. Why did he always take the insults? Why did he always remain calm? Why did he always hide his past? Why did he never show anger even though he had every reason to? And why was he reacting so strangely today? She thought back to the morning when they entered the auditorium and he trembled when the principal mentioned the hidden hero, who saved people during the recent dangerous incident the whole town was talking about. He had looked shaken, terrified even. And now he couldn't stop watching the stage. Something inside her whispered that he knew something she didn't. Something big. Something life-changing. As she watched him stare at the stage lights, she felt a strange chill rush through her. Her stepfather, humble, soft-spoken, always quiet, was hiding something. A truth buried deep in his heart. A truth he tried to protect her from. A truth that was about to collide with this night. She didn't know what it was, but she felt its weight so strongly that even her breath felt heavy. And then, she noticed it. His hands. They were shaking again. Not from fear of the bullies. Not from cold. But from memories. Memories he carried alone. Memories he never shared. Memories that could break everything she thought she knew about him. She whispered softly, "Dad, what's wrong?" He didn't answer. He simply looked at the stage with eyes full of something she had never seen before. Like a man who knew the past was finally coming to find him. The laughter around them grew louder, crueler, meaner, but he didn't hear it anymore. His world had shifted, and she could feel it. Something deep, something heavy, something she never expected, was about to be revealed. And for the first time in her life, she was afraid of the truth too. As the applause faded and the principal stepped down from the stage, the auditorium shifted into a strange silence, the kind that makes people lean forward without realizing it. And the girl felt her heart beating faster, not because of the award, not because of the ceremony, but because her stepfather's entire posture had changed in a way she had never seen before. He wasn't just nervous. He looked like a man who had been trying to stay invisible for years and suddenly realized the world was about to turn its eyes toward him. He kept his head down, fingers gripping the edge of his chair, his breathing uneven, and when she whispered, "Are you okay?" he only nodded weakly, but his eyes were not okay at all. They were haunted, like he was reliving something from a past he never talked about. She reached for his hand gently, hoping to calm him, but even his hand felt cold, tense, like he was preparing himself for something he couldn't avoid. Around them, parents continued whispering, some laughing quietly, some making comments they didn't think he could hear. Why is he even here? Look at him. Doesn't fit in. She could do better. Their hateful words floated through the warm air like poison, but he didn't react. He just kept staring at the stage with a fear that made no sense. The girl felt a deep sadness wash over her because she had always wondered why he never fought back, why he always carried pain in his eyes, why he always told her to let go instead of defending herself. Now she understood. He was hiding something, something important, something heavy enough to keep him silent even when the world treated him unfairly. Then suddenly, the principal returned to the microphone, his voice echoing clearly. And now, before we reveal the identity of our mystery hero, let me explain what happened that night. Everyone leaned forward. Even the noisy boys stopped whispering. The girl's stepfather's breath hitched, and his shoulders lifted slowly like he was bracing himself. The principal continued, 2 months ago, a fire broke out in the old community building. Inside that building were 8 children trapped during a weekend workshop. The fire spread fast. The door was blocked. No firefighter had arrived yet. Gasps filled the auditorium. The girl stared at the principal, confused, because she remembered that day. Everyone talked about the fire, about how someone had saved the children before the firefighters arrived, but nobody knew who. The hero had disappeared before anyone could thank him. Those children survived because someone ran into the flames not once, not twice, but 3 times to pull them out, the principal said. He suffered heavy burns. He collapsed outside the building. But when the ambulance arrived, he was gone. The audience erupted into murmurs, shocked, amazed, curious. The girl's heart thudded harder. She tried to look at her stepfather's face, but he turned slightly away, staring into the floor like he was trying to hide inside himself. She whispered again, "Dad, do you know something about this?" He didn't answer. His jaw tightened, and a tear escaped from the corner of his eye before he quickly wiped it away with the back of his hand. She froze. He never cried. Never. He always stayed strong, even when people mocked him. But that single tear told her something deeper. He wasn't just reacting. He was remembering. The principal continued explaining the incident, each detail hitting her like a heavy stone. The children said their rescuer was coughing from smoke, shaking, and burned. But he kept saying, "It's okay, I'm here. I won't leave you." Her stepfather's head dropped lower. His shoulders began trembling. She stared at him in disbelief. "Dad, it was you, wasn't it?" He squeezed his eyes shut tightly, as if trying to hold the memory together, as if her words had pierced through the wall he'd been hiding behind for so long. He whispered, "Please, not here," his voice cracking. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't speak again. She didn't want to push him. She just held his hand tighter, hoping he could feel her support. Then the principal said the words that shattered the entire room. "Today, we honor that man. And I have just received confirmation moments ago. He is here. In this room." The auditorium exploded with surprise. People looked around in confusion, their eyes scanning every face. Some parents stood, craning their necks. Students whispered excitedly. But the girl wasn't looking around. She was looking only at him, her stepfather, who now had both hands covering his face, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably, his chest rising and falling too fast, like he was reliving the fire, hearing the screams, feeling the heat on his skin all over again. She slowly slid her arms around him, hugging him tightly. He didn't hug back at first. He was shaking too hard. But then he let out a broken breath and held her hand like it was the only anchor he had left. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered through tears. "You saved children. You saved lives. Why did you hide it?" He lowered his hands slowly, revealing eyes full of pain, exhaustion, and a sadness she had never seen before. "Because," he whispered shakily, "people don't see heroes in men who look like me." Those words stabbed her heart. Her breath caught. Her eyes burned. She wanted to scream at every person who ever mocked him, every student who laughed at him, every parent who looked down on him, because he was a hero. A real hero. A man who risked everything to save children while people judged him for the color of his skin, his simple clothes, his quiet nature. Tears ran down her face uncontrollably. The principal spoke again. "Sir, wherever you are, please come to the stage. Your courage saved our children." The room went silent again. Every pair of eyes searched for the unknown hero. The girl turned to her stepfather. "Please," she whispered. "They should know the truth. You deserve this." He shook his head, terrified. "No, they'll judge, they'll laugh. They'll say it was luck, not courage." She cupped his face gently, tears falling onto his hands. "They can't mock you anymore. Not after they know who you are. Not after what you've done." He stared at her, his eyes softening, something fragile breaking open inside him. Years of hiding. Years of pain. Years of silence. And as the auditorium held its breath, waiting, hoping, searching, he finally stood up. Slowly, hesitantly, like a man walking toward a past he never wanted to face again. And for the first time in her life, she saw not the quiet stepfather people mocked, but a man who carried bravery in his bones. A man who walked through fire to save lives. A man who deserved honor, respect, and love. And she knew the moment he stepped forward, nothing would ever be the same. The auditorium grew louder as more families entered, filling the room with chatter, laughter, and the quiet cruelty that floated in whispers toward the girl and her black stepfather. Yet he sat still with his hands folded softly in his lap as if he had trained himself long ago to ignore every insult, every stare, every painful joke thrown at him like stones. The girl sat beside him, her anger boiling harder each minute, especially when she saw a group of parents glance at him with judgment in their eyes, as if his skin color and simple clothes meant he didn't belong near them, as if he was some inconvenience placed in their expensive, perfect world. She wanted to scream at them, wanted to stand up and shout that he was the kindest man she had ever known, the man who held her when she cried, who taught her to respect everyone, who helped neighbors secretly at night, who worked 2 jobs so she could study in this school, the man who entered her life quietly after her father passed away and never once tried to replace her dad, only tried to make her life gentler. But he placed a calming hand on her arm, giving her the soft smile he always used to hide his pain, and whispered, "Don't worry about them." Though she could see the sadness hiding in his eyes like a shadow too deep for words. As the ceremony continued, teachers spoke proudly, students clapped, parents cheered, and yet she noticed her stepfather growing quieter, his breathing slower, his shoulders sinking. He had been nervous since they arrived, but now there was something else. Fear mixed with shame, like he was waiting for something he didn't want to face. When she leaned closer and whispered, "Are you okay?" he simply nodded. But his hands were shaking so much she knew he was lying. She didn't understand why a simple ceremony frightened him like this, why he kept his eyes glued to the stage instead of looking at her, why his jaw tensed every time someone said the word hero during the speeches. When the principal returned to the microphone, excitement rushed through the room as she announced, "Tonight, we honor someone very special. Someone this town owes everything to, our mystery hero." People sat up straight, cameras ready, children buzzing with curiosity. The girl glanced at her stepfather again, and something in his face made her heart stop. His eyes widened just slightly, then softened with a pain she had never seen before, and suddenly he looked older, heavier, like he was carrying a memory he had spent years trying to bury. She whispered, "Do you know who the hero is?" But he didn't answer. Instead, he swallowed hard and lowered his gaze, gripping the edges of his seat as if bracing for impact. Before she could ask again, a group of boys sitting 2 rows ahead turned around and whispered loudly, "Bet it's not your stepdad. He looks like he can't save himself." Their parents laughed quietly as if it was harmless, but the girl felt her throat tighten with rage and heartbreak. Yet her stepfather didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't even look up. It was like he wanted to disappear into the chair. The principal continued, explaining that the hero had saved lives during the recent highway accident. An accident so terrifying that even the police were scared to talk about the details. People gasped and began guessing names of firefighters, doctors, police officers, but the girl's stepfather kept staring at the floor, breathing deeply, as if every word dragged him into a memory he didn't want to relive. The girl reached for his hand, squeezing gently, whispering, "Whatever it is, I'm here." He looked at her for a moment, and in his eyes she saw a storm, fear, pain, guilt, sorrow, and something else she didn't understand yet. Something that looked like a secret begging to come out. Suddenly, a teacher appeared on stage holding a sealed envelope, saying, "The hero requested to remain anonymous, but tonight, by special approval, we reveal his identity." The audience cheered, waiting with excitement, but the girl felt something strange in her chest, as if the air thickened around her. She felt him go completely still beside her. His shoulders froze, his breath stopped, his eyes stared forward unblinking, and she felt his hand tighten around hers, not in anger, but in fear. Real fear. She whispered his name softly, asking what was wrong, but he couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt like the whole auditorium faded away except for the stage and the envelope. The teacher slowly opened it. The girl held her stepfather's hand tightly, feeling his palm sweat, his fingers trembling, his heartbeat pounding through his skin. The teacher smiled politely and said, "The hero we honor tonight is," but before she could say the name, a loud whisper erupted from behind them. A parent leaned forward and whispered loudly enough for half the row to hear, "Imagine if it was the black man. That would be funny." The girl's stomach twisted, tears burning behind her eyes, but her stepfather didn't react. He just stared at the stage, tears gathering silently in his eyes for the first time since she had known him. She had never seen him cry, not even when life got hard, not even when people were cruel. She reached up and brushed a tear from his cheek, whispering, "Please tell me what's happening." But he shook his head slowly, whispering back in a voice too broken to hide, "I didn't want you to know like this." She froze. What did that mean? What truth was he hiding? Why was his voice shaking like a man carrying years of regret? The teacher took a deep breath on stage, about to say the name that would silence the entire auditorium. The girl's heart pounded. Her stepfather's breathing turned shallow. His eyes closed tightly as if preparing for something painful. And in that single second, between silence and truth, she knew her life was about to change forever. Because the man she thought she knew was someone the whole town had no idea about. And the secret he had been hiding all these years was finally coming for him. The auditorium grew louder as the ceremony neared its final moments, but the girl felt her entire world go silent when she saw her stepfather sitting beside her with his eyes lowered, his hands pressed tightly together in his lap, shaking the same way they had shaken that night when she heard him crying alone in the kitchen, a night he thought she was asleep. And now the same trembling returned, stronger, deeper, like his body was remembering something painful he had spent years trying to forget. She leaned closer to him, whispering softly, asking if he was okay. But he only gave her the same gentle smile he always gave when he was breaking inside, the kind of smile that tried to protect her from worries he didn't want her to carry. She didn't believe the smile anymore. Not after everything she had seen these past few months. She had seen him come home late with dirt on his hands and a cut on his finger he didn't explain. She had seen him stare at the news silently whenever stories about accidents, fires, or emergencies appeared. She had seen him freeze whenever he heard a siren, as if sirens reminded him of a life he buried deep inside himself. She had seen him wince every time someone mocked him for his skin color, pretending not to hear while his shoulders stiffened like he was holding back an invisible storm. Tonight, she felt that storm closer than ever. She watched as parents whispered things they thought he couldn't hear, as students snickered, as some people shifted away from him with thoughtless disrespect. And though she wanted to scream at them, he gently placed his hand on hers and whispered again, "Let it go." But this time, those 3 words scared her. Because they did not sound like patience anymore. They sounded like someone tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of carrying a truth too heavy for one man. She felt his fingers trembling beneath hers, and she squeezed his hand, whispering, "You're not alone." Even though she didn't fully understand what he was hiding. She only knew that whatever truth he carried was hurting him more than the mockery around them. Then, the lights dimmed, the chatter softened, and the principal stepped forward with a proud smile that filled the room with excitement. Tonight, the principal began. "We honor a man the entire town owes its life to. A man who risked everything to save others." The room buzzed with curiosity. The girl's heart pounded. Her stepfather's breath caught in his throat. The principal continued, "A few months ago, during the worst highway accident in years, someone rushed into a burning bus, pulled 4 children out, rescued a driver trapped under metal, and stayed until the fire trucks came." People gasped. Students whispered. Parents leaned forward. The girl felt her pulse race. A burning bus? Children rescued? A driver trapped? She suddenly remembered something. Her stepfather coming home late one night with his shirt smelling like smoke. His arms red like they had brushed something hot. His voice hoarse when he said he was just tired. She had believed him then. Now she realized she shouldn't have. The principal lifted a sealed envelope. The fire department and the mayor conducted a secret search to identify the hero. And tonight, we reveal him. The entire auditorium leaned forward as he opened the envelope dramatically. The girl felt her stepfather tense, his shoulders lifting slightly as if bracing for impact. She squeezed his hand. He didn't squeeze back. Instead, he whispered something she had never heard from him in her life. "I'm scared." The girl felt her breath stop. Her strong, calm, gentle stepfather, scared? The principal raised his hand dramatically. "Tonight's hero is," but before he finished the sentence, a loud whisper erupted from a group of boys behind them. "Bet it's someone important. Definitely not someone like him." Laughter followed, cruel and sharp, cutting through the man's heart. Her stepfather flinched as though each laugh was a slap, but he didn't look back. He didn't defend himself. He didn't move. He only stared at the stage with a hollow expression. The girl turned around, anger burning inside her, ready to yell, ready to defend him. But before she could speak, something unexpected happened. A woman sitting a few rows ahead suddenly pointed toward her stepfather. "Isn't that the man from that night? The one who was carrying kids out of the fire?" Heads turned. Eyes widened. Whispers grew. The room slowly shifted its focus toward them. Her stepfather lowered his head even more, his hands shaking harder now. He didn't want attention. He didn't want recognition. He didn't want to be seen. He wanted to disappear. But the truth was stepping into the light on its own. The principal finally spoke the name aloud. And the moment the name echoed through the hall, her stepfather's name, time froze. The entire auditorium gasped. People stood. Students whispered in disbelief. The boys who mocked him earlier stared with mouths half open. And the girl watched the world shift around her as if fate itself had been waiting for this moment. Her stepfather closed his eyes, the truth finally catching him, and she felt him break inside. The kind of breaking that comes not from fear but from years of silence collapsing all at once. When he finally opened his eyes, tears were already gathering, shaking with memories he never wanted anyone to see. She grabbed his hand with both of hers and whispered, "Don't hide anymore." He looked at her slowly, his face softening, his walls falling, his voice weak. "They'll look at me differently." She shook her head. "You deserve to be seen." And when the principal called his name again, louder this time, clearer, with respect filling every syllable, the auditorium lights brightened, the spotlight searched the crowd, and every whisper quieted as if the world itself paused. Her stepfather let out a long, trembling breath. And then, slowly, painfully, bravely, he stood. The room fell completely silent as the girl stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, her heart pounding so hard she could hear every beat inside her ears. And when she slowly turned toward the stage, she saw her stepfather standing there under the bright light, looking smaller and more frightened than she had ever seen him, his hands clasped together, his shoulders shaking, his eyes lowered as if he was terrified to look at the crowd who had spent years mocking him, whispering cruel comments, treating him like he was invisible or unworthy. She could feel the tension in the air, a heavy tension that wrapped around her chest and refused to let her breathe because she knew what was coming. She knew that once the principal started speaking, the world would see her stepfather differently, not as the quiet man who worked long hours and helped neighbors for nothing in return, but as someone far bigger, someone who hid a truth so heavy he had carried it alone all these years. She watched him swallow hard, his throat trembling, and even from a distance she could see the fear in his eyes. Fear not of the truth, but of how people would react to it. Fear that the ones who had mocked him the most would now try to claim him, praise him, pretend they had respected him all along. The principal adjusted the microphone and looked at him with pure respect. A respect so deep it made her heart ache because she wondered how many years her stepfather had gone without feeling that kind of respect from anyone in this room. And then the principal began speaking, slowly, clearly, each word dropping like a stone in still water, sending ripples across the auditorium. "Tonight," he said, "we honor the man who risked his own life to save 22 people from the burning highway bus last month." A wave of gasps spread across the room. The girl felt her knees weaken. Her breath caught painfully. She turned to look at the crowd, parents whispering in shock, students staring with wide eyes, teachers exchanging stunned glances. She heard one boy whisper, "But, that can't be him," and another say, "There's no way that quiet janitor-looking man did that." But the principal continued, his voice steady and full of pride. He carried injured passengers out one by one. He broke the window with his bare hands. He lifted a fallen metal bar that weighed more than 100 kilos to free 2 trapped children. He stayed until the last person was safe, even when the fire reached the fuel tank, even when everyone else ran. The girl felt tears spill down her cheeks. She had heard about that incident. Everyone had. It was all over the news. People called the rescuer a mysterious guardian, a hidden hero, a brave stranger who disappeared before the fire trucks arrived. But she never imagined it was him. Her stepfather. The same man who quietly walked her to school, who never raised his voice, who always smiled softly even when people spit cruel words at him. The same man her classmates laughed at. The same man parents looked down on. The same man whose skin they insulted, whose clothes they mocked, whose silence they twisted into weakness. The principal continued, and when the emergency teams arrived, he refused to give his name. He refused cameras. He refused interviews. He said the only thing that mattered was saving lives. Her stepfather lowered his head even more, his eyes squeezing shut as if he was trying not to cry, his fingers trembling as he held onto the edge of the podium like it was the only thing keeping him standing. The girl felt her heart break open because she suddenly understood everything. Why he always told her to stay calm, why he never reacted to insults, why he always said, "Let it go." Why he had sadness hiding behind his gentle smile. He had seen true pain. He had seen real danger. He had saved lives while the same people insulting him had never even stepped outside their comfort. He knew what mattered in life. Not words. Not judgments. Not cruelty. But actions. Courage. Humanity. The principal's voice softened as he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please honor the hero we failed to see among us. Please honor this brave man, Mr. Thomas Hale." The applause didn't come immediately. There was too much shock, too much shame, too much disbelief. And then suddenly, one single person began clapping. A small clap, soft but strong. The girl turned toward the sound and realized it was herself. She didn't remember standing. She didn't remember moving. Her body had acted before her mind could catch up. She clapped with tears streaming down her face, clapped with her heart trembling, clapped because she had never felt so proud of anyone in her entire life. Slowly, a few students joined. Then parents. Then teachers. And soon the whole auditorium filled with a thunder of applause. But her stepfather didn't look up. His shoulders shook slightly, and she knew he wasn't used to this kind of attention, wasn't used to being seen, wasn't used to love or gratitude from strangers. She pushed through the crowd, her vision blurry, her legs all but running toward the stage. When she reached him, she climbed the steps and stood beside him, placing her shaking hand on his arm. He looked down at her finally, his eyes full of tears he had held back for years, and she whispered, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" His voice cracked as he whispered, "Because heroes don't need applause." She shook her head, tears falling faster. "But you deserved it. You deserved it every day." The crowd kept clapping, students who had mocked him now staring with awe and regret, parents who judged him now whispering apologies to themselves, teachers who ignored him now bowing their heads. But none of that mattered to him. All he cared about was the girl standing beside him, the girl who had defended him with her silence, who had loved him through the world's cruelty, who now saw him, the real him. She hugged him tightly, burying her face in his chest, and he finally let a soft sob escape, the weight of years sliding off his shoulders. "I'm proud of you," she whispered through her tears. "I'm proud to call you my father." And with trembling hands, he hugged her back, whispering, "You were the only one who made me feel like I wasn't invisible." The applause thundered on, echoing across the auditorium, but inside that hug, it felt like the entire world had finally fallen silent, finally recognizing the man they had ignored, mocked, judged, and belittled. A man who was never nobody. A man who was never weak. A man who was, and always would be, a hero.